Good morning, guys. It's Catherine here, and I wanted to share with you guys today my experience with falling in love with my ego and allowing myself to just fully love my ego so that it can just be a little bit less annoying, I guess, is what I would call it. So, um, for a lot of us, we've been told in the spiritual community that our ego is a bad thing and that we need to be less in our ego and more in our heart. And I do agree with that. We do need to be less in our ego and more in our heart. Uh, but however, when I first heard this, I thought it was about diminishing my ego rather than allowing myself to fall in love with my ego. And last year, I went to the Evolving Out Loud weekend with Kyle Cease at the Dolby Theater. And that weekend, my ego was so incredibly triggered. I was carrying around a story of being abandoned and being rejected. And when I seen the homeless people in Los Angeles, it really hit me hard. And seeing them, I was actually stepping into my own fears of abandonment, my own fears of rejection. And I, I cried so much just seeing the living conditions that these people were in. And at one point, my husband and I were going back to our hotel room, and I was expressing to him what this story had meant for me and where I was feeling alone and rejected and abandoned in my own life. And he had asked me, is this true? And I said, well, no, actually, it's not true because I've always had people. But there's been times where I felt extremely alone. And there's been times where I felt completely rejected. And there's been times where I felt completely abandoned. And my husband asked me, do you want me to just, when you're going into this story, to go like, hey, this is your ego? And I was like, actually, yeah. That would be awesome if you could just be like, hey, that's your ego talking. And we got back to the hotel room, and I grabbed a Coca-Cola from the fridge, and Coca-Cola has always been like my drink when I'm feeling powerless or feeling tired or whatever. I always drink a Coke, and it's been a bit of an addiction. But the Coke that I grabbed, it said, hi, my name is Kevin on it. And I had taken a drink, and I was like, haha, maybe I can call my ego Kevin. And my husband screamed out, Kevin! And I was like, you just sounded like the mom from Home Alone when Kevin gets abandoned. And I was like, holy shit, Kevin was abandoned too. And in that moment, I decided to start calling my ego Kevin instead of ego, because Kevin actually added in this personality that was behind it. And I figured I could work with Kevin better than what I could work with calling it my ego, because my ego seemed like it was this bad thing. And I knew from doing the work with Kyle Cease that I needed to love the parts of me that were feeling abandoned, that were feeling rejected. And by putting a name to it, like Kevin, it actually allowed me to start loving Kevin for feeling rejected and for feeling abandoned. Because a lot of times we're so much nicer to the people in our lives when we're hearing their stories and we go, oh my God, like that would have been so hard for you. But when it comes to ourselves, we're like, oh my God, get over it already. And so I've been working with Kevin for almost a year now. I think it's like June 24th will be a year of working with Kevin. And it has been absolutely incredible because I've been able to identify and to step away from what the old story has been by allowing myself to go, okay, so this is Kevin that's talking right now. And Kevin's feeling triggered because of this abandonment issue, or Kevin's feeling triggered because of this rejection, but it's not actually my truth in this moment. It's that these old feelings are actually being triggered and being brought up so that I can love them. And so rather than being like, okay, fuck off, ego, it's more like, okay, ego, Kevin, what is it that you're trying to show me right now? What is the story that's coming up for you that's making you feel so triggered, that's making you feel so heavy, that's making you feel so sad or depressed or angry or whatever? And then I sit down and I just allow the Kevin in my mind to just go on its little tangent. And in it going on its little tangent, it's being heard, it's being seen, it's being validated. And I actually had a dream last October. And in the dream, I had gone to a wrestling tournament and I was watching these wrestlers. And there was this young teenage boy that was wrestling. And he was being really mean to the other wrestlers. He was taking these like cement blocks and placing them on the wrestlers' heads. And I pulled him away. And I said, like, man, you can't do that. Like that's illegal and that's wrong and that's hurtful. And he looked at me and he scowled. And I said, my name's Catherine. What's your name? And he said, hi, I'm Kevin. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then I said to him, I hear you, I see you, I validate you. And then it was just kind of like the end of the dream, how dreams kind of go like that. And when I woke up, I went, holy shit. I've just made friends with my ego. I've introduced myself to my ego. I've introduced myself to the angry teenager. I've introduced myself to this person who's feeling unseen, unheard, unvalidated. And in that, we started this relationship of me really allowing myself to hear what my ego has to say. Instead of rejecting it more and abandoning it more and leaving it behind more, I just allowed myself to really just fall in love with these parts of myself that I had been rejecting for so long, because it really had nothing to do with anyone else rejecting me. It was me rejecting my own story of feeling rejected or feeling abandoned or whatever. And so this has been like a year in the making of me just falling in love with this Kevin character that plays on in my mind and has this story. And no, it's not like a multiple personality thing. It's just simply allowing myself to separate what the story has been and stepping into the truth of who I am. Because as long as I'm separating myself from the story, because it's all just a story, everything in life is all just a story. And we pick up on what our own experiences have been, what our own triggers have been, and then we allow ourselves to attach ourselves to what that story is. And when you can separate yourself and go, okay, so the truth in this moment is I'm not rejected. In this moment, I'm not rejected, but my old story is being triggered by this experience that's happening right now. Then you get to detach yourself and see what the truth really is for you, which is that you're pure love, and that you're here for a purpose, and that nothing is ever actually a rejection. Sometimes it's an alignment into a better path. Sometimes it's not abandonment, but it's an opportunity for you to step further into who you are and what you are, what your light is, so that you can spread that love even further into the world. We have spent so long sitting in shame about who we are and what our experiences have been. And by allowing myself to name my ego, I'm no longer feeling shameful for what those triggers have been. I'm no longer feeling shameful for what my experience has been. It's just allowing myself to go, okay, so this was a part of it. And this was a character that came up because of what the experiences were, but it's no longer the truth of who I am. So I invite you guys today to name your ego. And it can be any name. I've got a friend who's named her ego Stella. I have a friend who's named her ego Fred. It doesn't matter what your ego's name is. It's about you falling in love with these parts of yourself that you've held so much shame over, and so much anger, and so much fear and rejection and all of that. And allowing that character to actually start speaking to you, instead of telling it to sit down and shut up, that you're actually allowing it to speak to you, and you're hearing it, and you're absolutely loving it. Because it's through the love that will actually start to transcend ourselves, so that we can show up in this world and be the absolute greatest that we can be. So name your ego. If you want, drop your ego's name in the comments below, and just start that relationship with your ego where you're loving it and you're allowing yourself to just truly love the parts of yourself that you've been feeling shame about, or that you've been rejecting, or that you've been abandoning for whatever reason. No judgments. It's just allowing yourself to start that relationship so that you can detach from what the story has been and really step into the story of who you are now. Anyways, I love you guys, and have a great day.